Thank you all so much for being here. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our moderator. She is the editor at Variety, Jenelle Riley.
Thank you all so much for coming out for this evening with everyone's obsession. We were liars. Please join me in welcoming today's guests. First of all, they're co-showrunners, but first we have a producer, writer, and novelist who previously created the series Roswell, New Mexico. Please welcome Carina Adly MacKenzie. Joining her is her co-showrunner. She's basically responsible for all your favorite shows of the last few years from the Vampire's Diary universe as a writer, creator, EP, and director. Please welcome Julie Plec. Thank you both so much for being here. And I just want to say, as you know, someone who was a fan of the books, thank you for not messing it up. I'm half joking, but when you love something and you want it to turn out well. Yeah. I think that shows too, honestly. Before we get started, actually, Dustin was just talking about the library, and Julie, you were saying that you're a big fan of the Foundation Library.
I am a huge fan. Oh, mine works. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of the Foundation Library, and I actually really wanted to talk about it because I didn't know what it was until the first time I set foot in it. And that was it was right before COVID. So let's just say 2018, and I've been in this business since 1995. And so there was a whole 23 years in which I did not know what this resource was, which is you can literally, I know he just said it, but I'm gonna say it again in awesome terms, which is you can walk in. I mean, now you need an appointment, but you can still walk in and you can give them a list of all of the scripts that you want to read. And then they give you an iPad with all of those scripts, if they have them, which they have most of them on it. And you just sit there like you're back in school and you're back in library study time and you just read whatever you want. They have books on the craft. They have, I think when I was writing Girls on the Bus, I went and I read the two Ally McBeal pilots, because there's not one, there's two scripts, because they shot it and it was bad. And so they rewrote it and reshot it. And now both scripts are available to read in the library. I read Aaron Sorkin's The West Wing pilot. I read Greg Berlanti's Political Animals pilot. And I sat there all day and like a student of writing, I sucked all the beauty of the words of other people so that I could, find words of my own. And it's just so great, and it's free. But it also needs money. So if anybody here is independently wealthy, donate. But also you can go for free. So
I mean, you sold me. I had no idea. It comes on an iPad, so it's not like stacks of scripts.
Well, it can be, which is also kind of fun in a way that if you are the kind of person who likes a book and not a Kindle, there are actual leather-bound versions of certain scripts that that you can read too. So it's kind of a little bit of everything.
Cool. I can be very analog, but sometimes when you want to be looking at 10 things at once, it can get heavy. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. This is an audience, I think, largely of your fellow writers.
Thank you guys for coming. I really didn't expect a full turnout. I'll be talking to my therapist.
I always actually like to go back and start at the beginning, which was what do you consider your first thing as a writer? Were you doodling sketches as a kid? Were you already writing novels when you were 10?
When I was in 4th grade, I wrote what is essentially a fan fiction of The Secret Garden, but I thought I could do it better. I didn't like the ending. I thought it needed more characters, and it was long. And I gave it to my 4th grade teacher. Her name is Cameron Rosenblum. She's a novelist now. And she cried when she read it. And I was like, oh, I like this power.
That's amazing.
And the rest is history. I've been adapting shit ever since.
Yeah. You just made me remember, the first thing I ever did was basically Happy Days fan fiction, which shows how much smarter you were than me. I was copying TV shows.
It's funny because I wrote, there used to be this thing in school, and I don't know if it still exists, but it was called the Young Authors Contest. And so when you were in 1st and 2nd and 3rd grade, you would just write, and it was, I'm very old, so we would write it on paper, and then they would bound it in this fabric, bind it in this little fabric bendy cover, and it was pocket size, and then you'd submit it, and if you won, you got a little gold seal on it. And I won for nothing. I mean, it was so not a story, but I don't know, it was cheeky, which is usually how I get away with things. With like, you just get a little funny, and then everyone's like, "Oh, you're fun," that's great. But I never thought I was a writer, and it wasn't until like I started writing that I looked back on that story of like my first and second grade, because I think I won twice. And then in third grade, I wrote out by hand on mimeograph paper, again, old. I just decided I wanted to like put up Cinderella like as a play. And so I wrote Cinderella, the play, on mimeograph, and then I took it to the kindergartners and put them in my play. And then we did the play in the school library one day, and I was the fairy godmother.
Wow.
So we've both been stealing ideas from
Yes,
other people from
exactly.
the jump
Yeah.
and just executing them.
Yeah. But I had forgotten all of that as I grew up and realized I was never going to be a writer, and I didn't want to be a writer, and I couldn't be a writer. Like all of that went away until I became a writer, and then remembered.
And what was the moment where you felt you became a writer?
It's a long story that I will boil down to basically after many, many, many years of helping other people write. I helped so well that I realized I had like a collection of lines of dialogue that I had written that had gotten on the air. One of which was a quote from Dawson's Creek that somebody put on a T-shirt. And I thought, all right. Oh God. Okay. It was the first episode of season 2 where Dawson is coming to pick Joey up on their first date, and he's holding a little bunch of wildflowers, and he says, something to the effect of like, I thought, candies or bubbles, but I opted for foliage. And that's what's the line. And that was it. So I'm like, if I can have a T-shirt uncredited, then maybe I can work as a writer and like make that a career.
I saw a tweet today, or maybe yesterday, of a scene from Dawson's Creek that was like, "This is my favorite scene from Dawson's Creek," and it's a scene that Kevin has told me that you mostly wrote.
You're off the hook?
Yeah.
I just saw that too. I was like, yeah. Oh, you're off the hook. That was many years later.
The simple act of loving you is enough for me.
Oh, that was
So
you.
you're off the hook,
No,
Joey.
I don't think I wrote the whole scene, but I did pitch the "you're off the hook"
Kevin gives you credit.
bumper. Yeah, I'll take it. Why not?
And Carina, what do you sort of consider as your first job as a writer? Because you, I believe, started as a journalist.
Yeah, I started really as like a recapper for the LA Times, and then that evolved into journalism, largely because Julie and Kevin Williamson read my Vampire Diaries recaps and liked me and wanted to get to know me and liked how I saw the show. And I know for sure my first ever interview as a journalist was with Kevin, who was a huge hero of mine. And I was so nervous. I remember I was just like, I got on this phoner, those 10-minute quickie phoners. And I was like, "I'm so nervous. I'm so sorry." And he was like, "Well, now you don't have to be, because he told me you're nervous. That's all you have to do. At the beginning, when you're nervous about something, just say that you're nervous, and then you'll stop being nervous." And it has worked for me ever since. But yeah, so I mean, I considered myself a writer as a journalist. Sure. I was writing, and I really loved that job. But ultimately, Julie poked and prodded me until I jumped ship and applied for a lot of writer's assistant jobs, and ultimately found out that she had kind of been holding the original's writer's assistant position for me. She just needed me to find myself there.
That's amazing. Well, from these humble beginnings, you're now behind. You've helmed Amazon's #1 global hit show with We Are Liars. Yeah.
We were liars, not we are liars. There's a reason for the past tense.
Yeah, there will be spoilers. So before we actually get to the show, which we're gonna get into depth, I think we'd just love to know some more about your journey. You mentioned Kevin Williamson as someone who really championed you along the way.
I mean, Kevin and Julie, specifically Julie, like literally all credit. I would be in my mom's basement without Julie being like, "You could do it, kid." Sometimes maybe do it less or differently, but like you could do it. I was a very enthusiastic writer's assistant to a fault, but I was vocal enough that they really had no choice but to give me an episode in that first season, and I wrote one with Julie, and I really knew at that moment that it was like there was a whole path of my life that like in that moment was mine to lose. I really didn't want to mess it up. And I didn't, thank God. It was a good episode. I'm still very proud of it. And then I did, I stayed on the originals as a writer until that show ended, and had cleverly, my reps with some help from Julie, had cleverly gotten a blind pilot deal wrapped up in my last season of working on the originals, which then became Roswell, New Mexico. Yeah, I mean, it's not really a long story, but it is a story of, I'm very grateful to my younger self because I chose my heroes very wisely. I've been very lucky, I have Julia in my corner. I also have Kevin in my corner. I've had Greg Berlanti in my corner. When you can call those people for advice, again, it's yours to lose. Like, and there have been detours along the way, but mostly it's been positive.
There are always detours. So some just are more traumatic than others.
And Julie, for you, who were some of the people who sort of championed you or gave you opportunities?
Well, my first real job, which I got about 9 months after moving to LA a long time ago, was being an assistant to the director Wes Craven, and his producing partner Marianne was a very generous person because she saw early in me that I had a gift of a almost like weird gift where I could take a stack of scripts that was like yay deep on my desk and read like 15 of them a day and then tell her like that one's good, that one's bad. They were mostly bad, but here's why it's bad, here's how it could be better, here's what it's about. Oh, there's this funny set piece in that one. And so I had this like magnet brain for essentially, development. And she hated that stuff. So she's like, great, you are now my new favorite employee. And she proceeded to make sure, one, I got all the opportunity when I worked for him. I got credit where credit was due, which was a big thing. She advocated for me to get an associate producer credit on Scream 2. After I was the assistant on Scream, I got the associate producer credit on Scream 2 and then a co-producer credit on Scream 3. And like, that was a big deal then and remains a big deal now, especially when you talk about women helping women. Like, she was absolutely 100% comfortable saying this girl has something special and she deserves to be noticed and recognized for it. And so she really was the one that kind of like gave me that early boost. And then, of course, because I was working on Scream and Scream 2 with Wes, I became friends with Kevin. And Kevin and I became very close. And that was in a moment in his career where he was doing very well. It was the Screams, it was Dawson's Creek, it was I Know What You Did Last Summer, it was Halloween, it was like, it was Kevin's launch into the stratosphere. And he got a deal, and he got an overall deal at Miramax, and he got to hire a sort of producing person, a senior level executive, and he offered me the job. And so I went and worked for him as an executive for a couple of years, during which I wrote the foliage line, if you're curious about the timeline. And then, funnily enough, Carina talks about Greg Berlanti. Greg has also helped me quite a lot over the years. He and I went to college together, but I actually got Greg his first job as a writer in this town. So it's just one full circle symbiotic relationship. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that when you said Wes Craven, I literally heard gasps.
Yeah. Everything that you just said about Marianne is what you have been paid forward your whole career, because that's all the stuff I should have just said about you 4 minutes ago.
No, but it's funny because, like, to me, this business gets a bad rap for people being like really cutthroat and competitive. And yes, this town is full of assholes for sure. But also, like, especially in a context of show running, it is literally my job to recognize talent in other people and then to mine that talent within an inch of its life so that I don't have to die on the job, because the job is not possible to do for one person, right? So you have to say, hey, you're really good at casting. Now you're my new favorite casting person. You, my God, you're a great writer. I'm going to have you take a pass at these scripts before I do. Thank God you're here to do visual effects, you person back there, because I don't want to do it. It drives me crazy. And so the better you are as a showrunner and the more that you are able to like discover other people's gifts, then the less torturous it is for you when all is said and done. And the more mentoring you're kind of doing. It's like the positive result of being a very selfish person. It's like you do end up giving a lot of people opportunity. And so literally the only thing left for you to do in that scenario is to tell other people who did the work.
Wow.
And to give credit where credit is due. And some people forget that part. And sometimes even I forget that part, because you're like, oh shit, you rewrite history. You're like, I'm tired. I worked hard too. But ultimately, it's like Carina MacKenzie wrote a large amount of the words of the season 1 of We Were Liars, and I shout that to the world because I was also busy doing my own part of the job too, and I'm
She
very
made
proud
it
of
look
that. So
beautiful.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a showrunner, and she said that she learned early on, beware a showrunner who wants to be the smartest person in the room at everything. Someone who's willing to say, like, you're an expert at this, take that, run with it.
Yeah.
Have you always had a good eye for spotting that, though?
I would say I'm probably better at that than I am at actually writing. But that's okay. I mean, it truly is okay that I've made a huge, beautiful career out of it. And I have a very love-hate relationship with writing. And so sometimes I prefer to spot the talent and to hand the baton over because I feel like the product is better. And so, and that again is my job. So I'm happy about that.
The very first writer's room that I set foot in as a writer's assistant on the originals in season 1 included Ashley Lyle and Bart Nickerson, who created Yellow Jackets. It includes Marguerite McIntyre, who just did Vampire Academy and is a genius. Michael Narducci, who we all worship. Diana Demijohn, who just ran the Dune series. Like it was just like a who's who of the future of TV, and that's talent spotting.
Wow.
And nurturing.
Yes, because that's an important part because it can be hard. This business can be very challenging and difficult. And I'm sure, I don't know if there were times where you ever thought about doing something else, but what kind of kept you going during those lower periods?
Not being good at anything else.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, like what else? I think people who stick it out in Hollywood stick it out because they love it, even when it hurts and even when it like kind of crushes your soul. And even when you have to get other jobs so that you can stick it out, like you love it, and there's really nothing else that you think you love more. And sometimes people go find that other thing, and I think thank God for them, because and go find the thing. But I wouldn't know what else to do, so I just keep changing jobs within my own job. Like the more I do, the more I decide I'm not going to do that part of the job anymore, which is actually the fun part.
I'm sure I have a lot of questions about running your own show, especially as 2 wildly successful female showrunners. Yeah. What was your first experience like making the leap from writing on a series to show running? What were you prepared for, and what caught you off guard?
Nothing. I think, it was so much harder than I expected it to be, but not because I didn't expect it to be hard, but because it was like harder in the places that I thought would be more fun. Like for me, like casting is not a very joyful experience. And I think as a kid, you think picking the the faces that are going to play your characters is so fun. You have to, you have to suffer through a lot of people saying your words in a way that makes you think your words suck. You have to watch a lot of really talented people get their hearts broken. And the things like that are learning, I am a good writer. I happily call myself a good writer. I know that when I'm alone in a room with my computer and my dogs, that I'm doing a good job. That doesn't necessarily translate to here's X million dollars a week and 300 people whose not only, careers, but also mental health and physical safety are part of your problem. And that's a huge, very scary, very big jump. I tell people all the time, I think I did it too soon. I think I did 4 years on the originals and then had my own show, and it was scary. I'm very proud of that show. I, probably have fewer regrets than I should have about that show, but it was certainly easier the second time around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had it was like a unconventional route to it because, as I mentioned, I was an executive and I was not a writer. And so I was producing a lot of television before I was writing television. And I produced a show called Kyle XY back in the day, which was my first baby. And I didn't create it. I didn't write it. I just found it and got it made and produced that first season and was basically a non-writing executive producer at the time. I was in the trenches. I was in the writer's room. I handled all the cuts, and I, helped pick all the directors, and I did kind of that job. And then I ended up becoming a writer on the show after the fact. And so when I got to Vampire Diaries was technically my first show running job. And where I was, hired to both write and show run with Kevin. But even that, I had Kevin, very powerful, important. No one's gonna mess with him, guy. So no one's gonna be like, if he says no, we're not doing that. Everyone's like, okay, if that, all right. So really, the hard part came. The hardest part. I mean, everything was hard, but the hardest part came season 3 of Vampire Diaries when Kevin was no longer there and I was there by myself. And the fact that I had just basically been writing for a living for like 4 years and now this whole thing was mine and I didn't have his voice to rely on anymore. And I was just terrified that like the fraud curtain was going to come up, and I knew I could produce it. I've been doing that my whole life, but like to write it really scared me. And I drove myself into the ground trying to prove myself. Good news is I proved myself and it went well, and thank God. Bad news is it took like 37 years off my life, and I had to mid-season I had to completely pivot and reevaluate my own process and how I was going to survive the job, because I wasn't going to survive it if I didn't like figure out how to be a boss and a leader and a manager and all of that. So everything I said about being good at like harvesting other people's talents really didn't start until I realized if I keep trying to do this myself and believing I'm the only one who can get it done, we're all going to die. And that's really how it went down.
I think that, that experience made, I would assume, is largely why it was so important to you. Like, as a staff, even as a writer's assistant, you got one episode. I was with that episode from the beginning. I was on the notes calls at the draft. I was, executing those notes with you. I was on set watching you talk to a director. We got back from set and I was involved in all of the notes and all the cuts and got to see every single bit of it. And I think that, that's the thing that without all of that, there is literally no way that I would be a showrunner, probably even by now, much less, when was 2018? 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And I think that, when we talk about scary ways that the industry is changing, that's just becoming harder and harder to do because the jobs are separating and they're, post is a year after the writer's room wrap. So those writers are no longer technically working for you anymore. So you can't really make them do notes on a cut. And, if I had one wish about the industry, it would be longer seasons, getting longer seasons back. But if I had 2 wishes, it would be that we could have the, the mechanism to get writers all the way through the pipeline, because that was not the hard part for me of being a showrunner. Like, I knew how to prep an episode. I knew how to talk to a director. I knew how to, the hard part is the pressure, or was the pressure at that time. And that's something that's like really hard to teach somebody how to handle. But yeah, I mean, it's a hard job. Most people don't really understand what show running is. And I didn't really understand what show running was until I was doing it and drowning. But it is really like Michael Narducci was, this thing that stuck in my head is not everything that could go wrong or has gone wrong on a show is your problem or is your fault, but it's all your problem.
Yeah.
And anticipating it before it happens is your problem. Fixing it after it happens is your problem. And that's, you have to be thrown to the wolves to learn it.
Wow. Well, I mean, obviously you did something right, which brings us to We Were Liars, one of the most talked about shows of the year. Obviously, obviously, this all begins with E. Lockhart's book of the same name. How did you become aware of the story, and what made you, see it as a series?
Somebody gave me an advance copy when I was working on the originals. It might have been like my roommate who had it and just slipped it to me, or it might have been that I reached out for it or something. But I do remember reading it early. I still have my ARC that I found. And I gave it to Julie to read on a vacation because I was like, you got to read this book. It's great. And that would have been in 2014.
Yeah, and I read it and of course cried my face off. And I think Sarah Schechter actually read it at the time too, and she was just started working for Greg Berlanti, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to try to get this as a movie," and neither of us said it was a TV show because it's not a TV show. In the same way that 13 Reasons Why 15 years ago was not a TV show because nobody was making TV shows that only could have 6 or 8 or 13 episodes or one season. You know, you had to really have the engine to even think about pitching a TV show. And so it went off into movie world, and Sarah Schechter did not get it, and somebody else did. I don't even know who. And they tried to crack it as a movie for a lot of years. And then Carina called me in what year?
2021 or 2018 about the first time.
Yeah.
It would have been 2017 because it was right before I got Roswell.
Yeah, she was like, We Were Liars is coming out of turnaround wherever it's been, and they're going to shop it for television. And so we collectively went to Warner Brothers, who are also fans of the book, and that's where we were both working at the time, and asked them to get it for us with a producer named Eric Feig and Picture Start, which is his company. And we tried our damnedest. We met Emily Jenkins, who's E. Lockhart. We did the song and dance. We begged her. We did everything, and then she said yes to Netflix instead of us. And that was fine. You know, Netflix is very cool.
She lived to regret it.
Yeah, she did. And then Carina, because you know, we liked her book so much during the pandemic, Carina just reached out to her and was like, "Hey, listen, I love your writing so much. Is there anything that isn't at Netflix?" and got another one of Emily's books and brought it back to us. Only that time I was at Universal instead of Warner Brothers, and it was brand new in my new deal at Universal. And I said, "There's this author who wrote We Were Liars," which we all love. If you haven't read it, you got to read it. She has another story. And so they optioned that with Carina. And so then Carina was like working on that, which probably was her diabolical plan all along, and heard from Emily. You know,
I mean, it was really in like a season was written at Netflix. Like I thought it was
Wow.
going to be on Netflix. I had given up. And then Emily casually mentioned that it was no longer moving forward at Netflix. And
it
I
was
was
actually
like,
Emily's diabolical plan to casually mention it to Carina.
and I was like, oh, that's sad. I have to go. And I called Julie, and I was like, we have an emergency.
She calls me. I
Wow.
pick up the phone. I call Kate Honingsberg at Universal, who's our executive, and I was like, "It's happening! It's happening! Go get it!" And then Amazon almost beat us. I was like, "Come on, man! This can't happen to me twice." And Amazon was trying to buy it, and Universal was trying to buy it, and Emily chose us.
Oh.
Which I thought was really lovely and a good happy ending story. So then we quietly, secretly picked up the phone and called Amazon and said, "We know you wanted this. Will you just buy it right now for us from Universal?" And they did.
Wow.
That was great.
That's amazing. And Emily has been very open about just adoring this adaptation, but you know that's not always the case with writers, and sometimes they don't want to be involved at all, which I totally respect. How involved was she in this?
Very.
Yeah.
And that was important to us. I don't think it was like I mean, I've written a lot of adaptations. You know, Roswell was the only other one that got made, but I've written a lot of them.
Secret
There's
Garden.
always Secret Garden. There's always that author was dead, so there's always like different levels, right? And so, I mean, I never met the authors of the Roswell books. This one, she was very involved in development. We started with a development room, a 10-week development room. She was in that room the whole time. She was in every casting session. She was in every, you know, director meeting. And then she and very involved as far as like she would, when we started our real room, would come in and she would read up all the documents and tell us what she liked and say, you know, there's this thing that I did this way in the book, and just so you know, here's why I did it that way. And we'd be like, oh yeah, we should do it her way.
Yeah, but the beauty of it is that we sort of offered her, like, that wasn't contractual. It wasn't like I must have approval, I must be there. It was, I think she asked in her contract if she could write one script, and so that was something we had to do. But
Happily.
Yeah, but she expressed interest in learning how to make television because she had watched this book of hers go through the ringer. And so we said, you are welcome to sit here and be part of any of this process that you want, because it is in the spirit of like, welcome to this crazy roller coaster that is television. And she really delivered on that, in that she was always there to offer an opinion, but it was never once was my buck. Never once was it, I can't believe you're doing this. Never once was it, I need to put my foot down. Literally what Carina just said was the most she would ever defend. More often than not, she was saying, I know I did it like this in the book, but you guys don't have to worry about that. I just made that up, So she was a very generous partner, and it's not always like that. So I wouldn't say go out inviting every novelist into your writer's room, and, as a rule. We just got lucky.
There were times when, like our first day in the writer's room, I called her from the car as I was leaving, and I was like, I'm so sorry, it's not going to feel like that all the time, because we were throwing crazy ideas around about like, maybe this sister's a sex addict, and maybe this. And I was like, oh my God, she must be panicking. Like, she must just, I'm sweating. Like, and I called her and she was like, I thought it was awesome. And I was like, I want it to be like the book. and the funny thing was that like, as everything evolved, she was there to give helpful hints and tips. And, a lot of it was like turned what could have been 3-day discussions into Emily being like, well, just so you know this. And I'd be like, oh, you just saved us 3 days of circling the drain and finally getting back to there. It's nice not to have to guess why something is the way that it is in the book. But also, like, I was the one who like had this pipe dream in my head of like just making the book exactly as it is and keeping it the same. And she was really excited about all the new stuff that we added. And we tried to be additive.
It's actually funny. Carina is like a novelist's dream, because Carina wanted to do the most faithful adaptation ever. And I'm a novelist nightmare, because I'm like, I love the book. I love the book. I've read it probably now 3 times, but I do not have a highlighter and notes and Post-its and flags. And Carina's copy looks like it's like teaching a Harvard
6
level.
copies.
Yeah. But it's funny, this analogy just jumped into my head, because the other thing about show running is writers can have completely different processes and completely different approaches to writing, and that is fine. And sometimes you end up partnering with someone, and then you have to like sort of adapt to each other's. And I was thinking of this analogy. It's like we're both Swifties, Carina and I. Carina knows every single word to every lyric of like, I would say 90% of Taylor Swift's entire library.
Oh, you are underselling me. I know the unreleased songs you could only get by downloading like a virus onto your computer.
So she knows that. She knows what each line means. She knows when one line said in like off the Fearless album was repeated melodically in Tortured Poets, and why those songs are sister songs, because they're 2 chapters of the same story. She has studied the poetry and the rhythm and the meaning and the nuance of Taylor Swift like it is her master's, the PhD, and that is how she writes. I'm the one that was like, long Starbucks sex lovers or something, but like it makes me no less of a Swiftie. I just like I work in vibes, and like, and so when I'm going through a script and I'm like, this 5 pages too long, I'm cutting this and I'm cutting this and I'm cutting this, and this one's going away, and editing worse because I love the scissors and editing. I'm like, this is going away and that's going away because it tightens up the episode. And she'd be like, what are you doing to the to the poetry? And I'm like, what do you mean the poetry?
I let you more in editing than I do in the script. In the script, I'm like, I just want to see it shot. Yeah. By the time it's in editing, I'm like, cut the arm off my baby.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, that is ultimately like when you talk about writers and different styles. I am a stream of consciousness, write like people talk, but when they can think of the cool thing to say in the moment, of course, not in the day after, like real life. Carina is one of the most thoughtful, elegant, nuanced writers that I know. And I'm kind of the opposite, because I'm like all instinct. And it's actually really good when we find our groove together, because it keeps her stuff from being too rarefied and it keeps my stuff from being too basic. So there's a nice marriage there. So if you're working with partners, figure out like, what the right version of the marriage is, because you're not going to be the same voice.
Now I want to call up like a Taylor Swift quiz and just
Oh,
spend the
God,
rest of the time quizzing you both. I have no doubt
That's
that
what
you
I
would win.
usually do with my Wednesday nights. So
But this series, it really does what a great adaptation should, which is it does honor the source material, but it also, it's a completely separate medium where it stands on its own. And as a result, fans of the book have really responded to it. I know you can't necessarily write with them in mind, but how much did you take that into consideration? And
so much.
Okay.
I would have nightmares about book talk hating me. I'm not well. But no, I mean, listen, like I never want to be the person who ruined the thing when the thing is so great. I think it's a lot easier to adapt something that's just kind of mid. You're like,
oh yeah, no.
oh, this is a good idea, but I can do better. That's a great feeling when you're adapting something. When you believe something is so beautiful and perfect and like, I mean, the book is smarter than me, and so it was very scary to go into it. I feel better about it now.
We did have, yeah. Well, yes, thank God. You've gotten some sleep, and the audience actually liked it. So, and Book Talk liked it, which is a small miracle in and of itself, as Book Talk goes. But we did have the luxury, thank God, because it is a book. I always say there's like three ways to approach adaptation, right? There's the I sort of read that book and it was so bad that I'm like grateful for the names I took.
Yeah.
And the like sort of general concept, I'm super grateful, but everything else I don't even think I read it past chapter 2, right? And then there's the what I call the Twilight adaptation, which is like, do not fuck with that book, right? Because they will come for you. So you're not like, there's not a lot of license there. You're just sort of trying, and in the middle is like what I'll call like Vampire Academy, which was like, I love these books so much, but each book is like only worth one episode of television. So I have to figure out how to take everything in these books that everyone loves and build an entire season out of it. And then more seasons, so it was more about picking and choosing where to put things. We Were Liars was a Twilight level, do not fuck this up.
Yeah.
But it's also a first person narrative about a girl with amnesia. And therefore, you have no idea what is happening on the rest of the island with the other characters, but you can't tell the TV show that way. You don't want to just see Cadence by herself or with, the liars or one other person just sort of like
Making up fairy tales in her head.
yeah, exactly. So we had the license to expand the world without sort of alienating the book audience, because the book audience understood that the world needed to be expanded. And then we also had Emily Lockhart's prequel that she wrote basically right as we were getting started, thank God, where we could then say, hey, listen, we're expanding these characters, but we're expanding them in the voice and, with using the foundation of this prequel that you've written so that they still feel true to you. And that, I think, why we got away with, as being able to take the license in the areas that we did.
I mean, social media can be a minefield, and it felt like the response was very positive. Was there a moment that you sort of felt you were in the clear? You knew you'd pulled it off?
I scheduled a vacation for right after we premiered with some of my most like active, fun vacation friends, because I was like, I will sit and scroll if somebody isn't dragging me onto a boat. And I was scrolling on the boat, and my friends were like, Karina, get off your phone. Like, this isn't good for your mental health. And I was like, no, it is. I was like, they're being nice. Everybody's saying nice things and people are crying. And it wasn't just that they were like, we like it. It was like all these little things, little nuances that I had hoped people would tap into, or the conversations I hoped people would have because of TikTok. I was watching them have them, and it felt very validating. It's the first time in my career, even as far back as like writing an episode of the originals, it's like all I'm seeing there'll be 100 mean tweets or 100 nice tweets and one that says the writing sucks, and that one is bouncing around my brain for 2 weeks. This is the first time that like the response has been so overwhelmingly emotional, not just positive, but like I can see that we're moving people. And I don't know if that's the medium because I'm looking at them crying versus seeing their 140 character tweet, but like I like being a writer right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I try to not scroll much because I got burned a lot. Vampire Diaries started and became successful when Twitter started.
Mm.
And so we had this beautiful run of community for several years that was really extraordinary, that sucked me in, you know, and I got sucked into the fandom. I got sucked into like what she's going through now, which is like really wanting to share that community with them. And then, of course, it's a show about a love triangle. And at the end of the third season, she makes a choice one way or the other. And boy, oh boy, did I watch the world change overnight on me. And then did not recover. Like I could not recover on social media ever because, you know, I was the person somehow that didn't give them what they wanted, even though I gave them what they wanted. But that the distinction is not clear, right? So I
don't
had to
know what they
train
want.
myself- Yeah, I had to train myself to like not care
Yeah.
what anybody thinks. But TikTok's kind of intoxicating, and so like every now and then I'd be like, all right, let's, because they started making those videos of like themselves crying at the ending
Yeah.
to the song, which is like my favorite song from the whole show. So I'm like, all right, I'll watch these. And I kept waiting for the sort of backlash or the like, oh, everyone's loving the show, therefore
Yes.
I'm going to be the person that hates the show, and I'm going to get the movement of the social media people that hate the show. And so I would see one that says, "Don't watch this stupid show," and then it would be somebody crying so hard they're like, "It's just too bad, I can't." Like, or somebody was like, "Fuck, we were liars," and then they'd be like, "This is the best show I've ever seen." So I'm like, okay, that's when I knew that we were probably fine.
I told our marketing team, do you guys remember when Gossip Girl had that marketing campaign that was just like, parents hate this show? It was like
Yes.
the quotes were all from angry parents about
Yes.
like, do not let your children watch the show. I was like, we should just like compile the videos of people saying, don't watch the show, don't turn it on, save yourself.
We actually have some time for questions from the audience. If you have a question,
Please
oh,
have
we do have a
questions.
microphone, and Dustin will bring it to you. We have one. Oh, we have two microphones. Wow.
So show running is clearly so chaotic. Doing a show, you're not the only one who said that. But
I can't do anything else. So
how do you, you know, you're in the edit, you've been on set, you've lived creating the show, right? How do you know the quality is there
Good
when you
question.
are having no sleep, the
Yeah.
chaos?
I don't. I have to have 10 million people tell me, and then I have to wait for it to come out. And I mean, I know when it's I think I know when it's probably as close to good as it's going to get. But I kept wishing in this process, and full disclosure, like if when Julie says I wrote a lot of it, I wrote a lot of it. She edited all of it. Like I was already trying to put together a season 2, and so the post was just like her beast. But I kept wishing I could just like erase it from my brain and watch it fresh, because all I think about is what's on the cutting room floor that was great. So
I think that is such a good question. I'm sitting here sort of like going back through my head to see if there's an actual answer. And I think I'll give you an anecdote, which is episode 2 of season 1 of Vampire Diaries, which is the first episode that you make after the pilot. So you've been off, you know, you made the pilot 6 months ago, you've been off in a writer's room, you know, you've come up the whole season, and now you're starting the show for real. And we shot an episode. Marco Siega, who had directed the pilot, directed it. We get the director's cut, which you have to get like 4 days after you wrap. It's ridiculous, but like they get no time with it. Kevin and I watch it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like, this is bad. What happened? This is bad. Like, we're bad. This show is bad. We're bad. Everything's bad. Marco's called, and he's like, it's so bad. He goes, I'm telling you, I know I made a better show. Like, I know, no, he said, I know I shot a better show. I know I did. And we're like, okay. So and it's never fun to do this, but like when you're on a schedule and you're in a crisis, you just do what you got to do. We gently and sadly let go of the editor immediately. And we brought the editor of the pilot, who had turned us down because we wouldn't let him be a director in the first season. And we brought him back, and we're like, episode 16 is yours if you can fix this thing.
Wow.
And we locked him in a room for, I'm not kidding you, probably 7 days, and like a refrigerator full of Red Bull. And 7 days later, he emerged, and we saw the episode again, and we were both like, oh, thank God. And it just worked.
Wow.
So the first rule of that, I guess, is you just have to know that it's never going to be infinitely better than what you yourself put on the page. acting can elevate it, directing can elevate it. But when all is said and done, if like what you put on the page is something that you believe in, and enough people who write checks and the actual like checks and balances of the process, the actors said the lines, the executives didn't, make you rewrite it. Like if enough of it has made it that way, it is theoretically the best it can be under very, very, very tight circumstances. It's never going to be great in anyone's mind, and your own included, but it's the best it can be. And so when you watch it and it makes you feel proud of it, then at least subjectively speaking, it's good. And then you have to say, all right, well, I think it's good. I don't want to kill myself, which often seeing director's cuts, just to be clear, I do. It is then you have to put it out in the world and see if subjectively anybody else agrees with you. And some people will and some people won't. And that is art. And that's the hardest part of the whole goddamn thing, is like something you love might reach nobody. Something you hate in someone else's work might be the biggest hit on Netflix globally, and and run for years. Like you just never know. And so you just have to sort of say, I did what I could. I gave it my all. I'm proud of this. And here we go.
Felt like maybe you were talking about a very specific show when you said something you don't like runs for years.
Honestly, I was like, there are some shows on some of these streamers where I'm like, if that's all it takes.
Yes. Yeah.
What have I been working so hard for?
Some movies too that win a lot of awards. We have one over here. Oh, well, I'll let Dustin handle the mic.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
Good. Thank you guys for coming here and telling
Thank
us
you
all
guys so much for
about
coming.
your journey. I was wondering, I'm a writer early in my career, and I'm wondering if you guys could look back, what is a life philosophy or mantra you've developed that you would impart on your earlier self? Thank you.
I have a lot, but I don't want to say them.
We were actually just talking about this. We were actually just talking about this in the other room, and we were talking a much more bleak way than the way I'm going to say this. But I think it's really important is that, like, always, 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 always believe that you have a dream and that you believe that you can work hard enough and be good enough to achieve that dream. Because if you can't believe that in yourself, like, there's no point, right? But the real world is going to throw a million things at you to prevent you from being able to do that. Right now, it happens to be a particularly depressing, if not full actual, like financial depression in this particular part of the business, television. If I could go back and tell my younger self, follow your dream, build your other career alongside of you, so that if you can't do this, or if you wake up one day and you hate it, that you have something else you love. Now, that day hasn't come for me, thank God. Like, I consider myself one of the luckiest ones, but what if it did? Like, what if I just woke up and nobody wanted to give me a job? Or, if I didn't love it and it actually hurt to go to work, like, wouldn't want to stay in it just so I could make a TV show, like, I wish I had something else that I loved that much, just as like an actual rule of life. So I think that is one thing. So don't give up, but also don't put all your eggs in the basket, because the business ebbs and flows with such severity lately, that you'll probably have a better chance at the success of the dream that you want if you have also figured out how to live the life that you want and, support yourself in the way that you can. Because right now it's just difficult to not have a job and to not know where you're going to get your first one, That's the sad advice, but I think important.
Yeah.
And timely. I think that the thing that I wish I had learned earlier is when it comes to criticism, and I don't mean like social media or even really like the critics in the trades. I mean like the criticism that you get from, people you work with, actors, the showrunner that you're working with, the executives that are giving you the notes. I wish that I had learned to modulate the degree with which I take those critiques personally. and make sure that they are relative to how much I respect that person. Because you are going to run into some assholes
Yeah.
in this industry, and their criticism should not be the stuff that lingers.
Yeah.
It shouldn't echo in your head for years and years and years. It did for me, and I think it became restrictive. And the other advice that I want everybody to know is do everything you can to not start your spec pilot with somebody waking up in the morning.
I mean,
Yeah. Because when we were staffing this second season of the show, I think I read 19 scripts where it's like, get up in the morning, you go downstairs for breakfast, there's your mom. And I was like, I just read this in the last one. If you can avoid it,
Mine
you
is
can do
like, do
better.
not make your entire first page of your sample text and not dialogue. But that's a whole different story. I will say this: the other
If they're
thing.
waking up in the morning covered in blood and there's a dead hooker, it's a different
Yeah,
story.
exactly.
wait, that I would buy the rights to that.
I will say this, and I genuinely believe this to be true because I have heard it from many of my peers, which is you are the kind of person that has an inferiority complex or a fraud complex, or you have that fear that like you're gonna wake up one day and everyone's gonna realize that you have no talent and all that. Like that is so common. And it kind of never goes away. So you sort of just learn to live with it. And then it's almost like you have to therapize yourself. Like I'll do that all the time. I'll be like, I suck at this. I'm so bad at this. And I'll be like, no, you have written this thing. It's very good. People really liked it. Dawson said it. Like you have a t-shirt, like you have a career. And it is it is okay to also like while you're believing in yourself and your dream on this side, if the other part of you, the other voice in your head is like you're terrible and you suck, that just is part of being an artist too. It just is, and you can't listen to it, but you also can't get rid of it. So you got to kind of make peace with it. It's not everybody.
Did you ever get one of those T-shirts that had your own line on it?
No, but I feel like now Carina knows what to get me for Christmas.
That just we do this. We talk a lot. You're welcome to our dinner party. That just reminded me. I think that I think my therapist told me this, but like when you get that imposter syndrome feeling that like I'm not supposed to be here and nobody knows that I'm not supposed to be here and they're gonna find out. Like you just have to turn it around your brain and be like, you tricked all these idiots.
Yeah.
Good job.
You know what's so funny? My therapist said years ago, I was like, I feel like I walked into this room and like I'm the one that doesn't know anything, or I'm the young dumb one, or I'm the one that doesn't belong. And she goes, so you think everybody else walks in the room being like, yeah, I fucking belong here, I'm awesome? And I was like, oh, you're probably right. Like they don't. Maybe one guy does, but we all know who that guy is, right? So it's like everybody else is walking into that room with the same insecurities, and they just, seem, because they're not you, they seem like they're so much cooler. But
this is the key difference between you and I. Is that your attack is be empathetic to everyone else in the room and how they're feeling, and mine is they're stupid. I'm tricking them.
But it's a balance of both.
true,
I
that
think
is
it
true.
is. Like I don't. If somebody doesn't have imposter syndrome, I honestly kind of worry about them.
I will say it was Marianne Madalena, who I referenced earlier, the West Green partner, who said, just walk in there like you got the biggest dick in the room. That was her catchphrase. And it works.
Yeah. We have time for one more.
Thank you so much for your candor today, and we love it, and also for giving flowers to a number of the people who've opened up doors in your careers, and just like making that something that is commonplace, giving those flowers and showing that gratitude.
Or giving
My
foliage.
question is about the business of writing. So moving through the 1,000,001 steps from being a writer's assistant to a showrunner, what are one or two tips maybe you can offer us, especially the women in the room, around navigating contracts and what to maybe ask for in contracts, moving from one phase to the other?
It's really hard because the ball keeps moving. Like you think, well, they did this to me this time and they're not going to do it to me again. They're going to do something else to you again, though. There's, the industry is evolving. It used to be you want to get X amount per episode, and now it's like you better get a weekly because those 8 episodes will take you 3 years to make. Having a really smart team we have the same lawyer who's really good at his job?
There's some tricks that are harder and harder to get away with, but I think taught you this lesson when on Vampire Diaries at the beginning. I was nobody, and Kevin was very important. So and they didn't want to give me an executive producer credit because it was my first show, even though I had done a show but not as a writer, and they were decided that not giving me an executive producer credit was the hill they were going to die on. And I said, okay, well, I'll be a co-executive producer, but I'm only going to give you a 2-year contract. And they, because they were so determined not to give me what I wanted, said, okay. And then 2 years later, Vampire Diaries was not only a big hit, but Kevin Williamson decided he wasn't going to continue with season 3. And there I was with a deal that came up, and they needed me, and I got all the things. and that is, the lesson is, often it's the money that they're so afraid of or the precedent that they're so afraid of. So find the thing that they haven't realized they should give a shit about, right? In general, it used to be you want like a long contract, 3 years, because then it's like, oh, I feel like I've got this like illusion of job security. No, what you have is incremental increases from 1 year to the next. They own your off time and that they can call you back in at any time. They can prevent you from developing and selling projects to other people. And yet now in this new market where it takes 8 episodes, takes a year and a half, and then they don't pick you up for another 6 months, you're basically sitting at their mercy in first position contractually. So now I would say to people, one and done. They want you back if you're good enough. Like, they're going to have to make a new deal with you. You won't get one and done unless there's something else that they don't want to give you that you say, okay. There's the don't haggle over pennies, but make sure they don't take other things, like put in that you want to be able to go to set. Are they going to say yes? Probably not. But if you get a piece of leverage, you might be able to get that in there. What else?
The most power you have is at the end of your deal when a new one starts. So like she said, if you have a 2-year deal and the show's probably going to go 4 seasons, the most power you have is right in the middle there where you can walk. And but that only counts if you've made yourself so valuable to the project. I also think that, like she said, there are weird hills that they'll die on. You need a team that will keep pushing for other stuff. I mean, I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, but on a show I was doing, my deal was up and we were re-upping it for the next part, and I, got to the sort of threshold money-wise that they were not going up, and I was like really unsatisfied. I felt like I was not being valued, and I was like, tell me I want to raise for my assistant. And I got it. So there's always something. There's always things that you can do to push things forward. And in doing that, I then was able to say to some other people around me, hey, I got a raise for my assistant in my contract. And
so when they tell you that assistants don't make more than $22 an hour, they're lying,
Yeah. And that's
precedent.
And that's the other thing is that, and we're still learning this because our whole lives we've been told not to talk about money.
Yeah.
But the more you talk about money and the more transparent you are with your peers and the more that you ask your mentors, hey, is this number, does this make sense? I mean, the biggest power move I ever made on one of the deals I was making was there was another writer who had started at the same time as me, worked on a sister show, like at the same level as me. And I was making my deal and I said, well, what's he making? To my agent, because I just felt like I was getting shortchanged because I'm a woman. And he was also at WME and they didn't want to tell me what he was getting. And I was like, I want more. And like they were able to leverage that they were able to then go to the studio and say, well, this writer who's worked the same number of years and the same number of episodes is getting this. So you do break that threshold for men.
To put it all in an umbrella, I would say just advice about deal making, because in a depressive time, nobody has any leverage, is your deal. Shonda Rhimes says it loudly and proudly, and I've never had the balls to see if it's true, but she says, don't ever go into a deal to make a deal that you are not completely willing to walk away from.
Mm.
And it is your willingness to walk away that will get you as close to what you think you deserve as possible. And she said her dad taught her that, and she's applied it to every deal she's ever made, and she has made some very good deals. That is
Yeah.
terrifying to me,
Yeah.
right? So I go under the whole, the best deal is where both sides feel like they got a little bit screwed, but like where neither side is like, yeah, because like ultimately, like that's the compromise. But finally, I will say that your deal is only at the lower levels and in the mid levels, and at this point at the showrunner level, is only as good, is going to be as good as the person who's willing to fight for you to get more is good at fighting. Because like I have writers that I believe in so wholeheartedly that I have fought to get them things that nobody wanted to give them because I couldn't lose them. I have also, I've also hit walls. You do hit walls, like I have also really let down friends of mine who I really believe in, that I fought and fought for and couldn't break through, but it was not without trying. So make sure that you understand your value to that person. And then if needed, like figure out organically how to sort of make that person go to battle on your behalf as well, if the situation calls for it.
I am inspired. I want to go to war right now. I do want to remind everyone, I'm sure probably everyone has seen the show by now, but if you haven't, all of the episodes are streaming now on Amazon Prime. Please spread the word. Thank you so much for being a great audience. Thank you so much for being here, for everything.